Welcome to the Saab J21 build. This is a mini-series build. So, here's everything that you'll need for this. You will need your wing section. Make sure to score all the red lines. You can leave the green lines alone for now. You will need your hatch. Same thing, make sure to score all the red lines, as the same goes for everything else. Your horizontal stabilizer. Your wing spars. You'll need 2 of these. Your booms. You should have 2 identical ones. Your top and bottom fuse reinforcers. Your skin segment 1, 2, and 3. You can leave the blue lines alone, but don't forget to score the red ones. You will need your formers, 1, 2, and 3. On the electronic side, you will need a receiver. 3-channel, or preferably 4 will do. This is a 3-channel aircraft, so it only has ailerons and elevator. You will need 3 servos. I'm using 3.7 gram servos, but you can also use 5 gram servos, and maybe 9 grams, but they will be on the heavier side for this airplane. You will also need a motor. So this is an 1806. This is a relatively low kV. It's a 1800 or maybe slightly bigger kV motor. You should really be using a 1806 2280 kV, a flight test APAC. And that will work wonderfully for this aircraft, paired with a 5-inch propeller. I'm using a 3-blade in this case since I'm using a lower kV motor. And I am using a 25 AMPSC, but whatever goes with the flight test APAC will work just fine. An FPAC could work in this aircraft, but it will lead it to be relatively tail heavy, and so it is not recommended. You will need, if you're using single channel ailerons, a Y lead, and of course you'll need a push rod. One of these long ones, just one of them should be enough. You will need 3 control horns for your 3 control surfaces, some pliers, some Z-bend pliers. These are specifically for Z-bends. You don't have to use them, but they just make Z-bends a lot easier. You are going to want some tape. This is just going to help along. Again, not really needed, but it will help a lot. You can't do anything without your hot glue gun. And a ruler. You'll also need a couple of bamboo skewers. You'll need 2 full-length ones and a couple of just shorter ones, as the full-length ones aren't really long enough, so we'll use these to help along with that. And an X-Acto knife for this. If you haven't centered your servos, this would be a good time to do so. And make sure to screw on the servo arms with a screwdriver and the screws, and prepare all that. So, by now your hot glue gun should have heated up, and let's start off with our fuselage. So you can pick any skin segments. We'll start off with skin segment 1. The order does not particularly matter here. And make sure you have all of these red lines creased and scored. What we're actually going to do now is take a bamboo skewer using the sharp end and just gently go through every single one of them, giving them enough space to fold up into an octagonal fuselage. This plane has an octagonal shape of the fuselage, so you have to give all of the sections enough room to fold up. You could also bevel them lightly, but this is just a lot less work than a bevel, and I have found it to work equally well. You can leave these blue lines alone. They just mark where you don't need a cut, and where you can just use them as a reference line for where the skins actually touch each other, because these are separate skin sections, and so they're joined together where those blue lines are. So we can slowly start making sure these skin sections can form together into a relatively even shape. So on this last one right here, this joins on the edge piece, so this is a good place to start. And on that edge piece, we're actually going to have to take a knife and carefully bevel this edge piece on all of them. This, you can bevel with a ruler, using the ruler as a reference point for your blade, and just make it a 45, even shallower degree bevel. I just prefer doing it manually. All you need to do is bevel one side, and if it isn't enough for it to nicely go together when you test fit, you can bevel the other. So mine goes together really nicely like this, so I don't need to bevel the other side. Same thing for this one. I'm just gonna slowly start bending each one in. This one's slightly bigger, each side is thicker, so you're gonna take it a bit slower. See, mine popped off here. That happens. All you gotta do is take a bit of tape and tape it back on. And if it isn't enough, you just go back with the other end, as it wasn't here, of the bamboo skewer, and just squish it down a bit more. And now it meets up here really nicely. Now time for the next one. Now it seems that some of this paper on top, we're going to peel it off anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and peel it off now. You can peel it off later. This paper on top seems to be preventing it from squishing down. This is a case-by-case basis. This could happen for you. It could also just not happen and you get lucky with your paper. So you can leave it on, but by the time we glue it, we're going to have to peel it off because it's going to affect the weight of the aircraft, and we want to minimize the weight of this aircraft because it's relatively heavy for its design as is. So we're going to be peeling off the paper on the inside of practically everything to make it easier to curve and also to lighten it. You can also start peeling off the paper with a knife. So now this tiny one right here, this one you can just not peel off the paper if you can have it join together, and don't forget to bevel it. So mine joins together nicely, so I'm going to leave the paper on here because this does not make a noticeable difference to the weight. But if you want to peel it off, feel free to. So now all of mine fit together nicely into an octagonal shape. So now, of course, it's not going to permanently stay in this octagonal shape as it has to be modified slightly to match the formers and just match the overall form of the aircraft. So for that, we have former 1. So former 1 goes after skin 1. Each one of these are named accordingly. Place it on here like this, and the sides should match up. It could be a bit smaller or a bit bigger depending on your skin. So mine is a bit big for fitting in here, so I'm actually going to trim the top edge down 1 millimeter or 2. This is just test fitting. It might take a bit, but the nicer and cleaner you get this, the nicer your build will be. There we go. So now it fits relatively nicely. So we're going to peel off this paper from one side, again to save weight. You could also choose to leave it on if you decide that you want to keep the strength but are fine with the weight. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our hot glue gun, and to start gluing this first one in, you're going to take a tiny drop of glue and just squeeze it into them. If you squeeze a bit too much into the one, just with the nozzle of the glue gun, carry it over to the next one and just put a tiny drop on the edge. You don't want to put too much, otherwise all that paper peeling made no effect. And you can always take a scrap piece of foam, just peel it, and just get the hot glue off. So this, actually, piece is the only one that takes the correct shape by itself and kind of works as a former because of how all the parts go together. So the order that we're going to glue this up in is this one, then we're going to do this one, potentially, and then this one and this one. So we're just going to do an order, but we're going to put this former in here, otherwise it won't really work. So you can tell that the shorter side always goes together and the longer side always goes together. So one of them is the top, one of them is the bottom. I'm just going to go with that. This edge right here needs to be beveled a bit or squished down. This one I choose to bevel, just so that this can fit up and our nose is starting to take a bit of shape. So now we're going to bevel, I'm actually going to bevel this edge a bit just to give it some more space for the glue to take hold. All that this is going to do is provide some more space for the glue since these fit really tightly and there's a huge change in angle. And then we're going to apply a bit of glue onto here and of course into these slots. You don't need too much, it'll hold itself together. Just a bit. And just hold it for a good 30 seconds until it dries. So now you're going to do the same thing for this. And that should fit nicely onto here. These might have a bit of discrepancy, and that's fine. This can be trimmed or just left. My gluing also is not the neatest. A neater glue job will, of course, lead to a much nicer airplane, mostly in looks, but also in how it flies. But it doesn't need to be perfect to fly well. And for this third skin, you can curl it up, but then after you do not forget to include the former. So now this one doesn't particularly want to go together, so I'll just do it one bit at a time. And now this one I'll just open up so when the glue dries it doesn't just close it up and make it unusable. I'll put some glue in here, right in there, and insert my former so as to have it take the correct shape. So now I'll re-add some glue onto here, some glue in here, and glue this in. Now again, this doesn't need to be perfect. This is just, if some of this doesn't fit right, this is just trim it to your liking, as this mostly just affects looks. Now same thing for this. We're just going to curl it up and glue it on there in accordance with the former. Now some of these sides might not fit perfectly, so try to press them into place, and if you have to take them slow one at a time, that's fine. But try to just align them so that they fit nicely with the previous one. This will just guarantee the correct shape for the fuselage. This is what your finished skin segment 1 will look like. As you can see, this is the nose of our aircraft. And it does resemble something of a J21 curved nose. You can also see how the octagonal system works here, with there being 8 sides here, and it being sort of a Master Series style build. For skin segment number 2 and 3, you can just take these and do the same exact process for them. for skin segment number 3, on the outside of this edge, this former 3 goes. But former 3 doesn't just go in like every other, it actually goes on the outside. It just is how I designed it that way. And you're also, before you close segment 3 up, you're going to want to take your motor and glue it to former 3. And then you can cut a small notch. I haven't found that necessary if you need it for the wires. And just route the ESC through skin segment 3. Other than that, they all assemble the same. And with former 2 going on this end, with the cutout bottom going into this slot right here on skin segment 2. So now you should have all your skins completed. You should have your first one that we did together. Your second one should look something like this. You will have your hatch cut out here and the beginning of your wing cut out over here. And of course your third skin with the ESC mounted on it inside. You don't need to glue it in or anything, just let it hang for now. Okay, so the next step will be to use these reinforcers. This top fuse and bottom fuse reinforcer, they're completely optional, but recommended as the nose doesn't really like taking impacts and you're bound to crash at some point. So what you do is you're going to take your knife and you're going to cut a slot about the width of one foam board on the inside of your former. You could align the former on the inside just to get a nice measurement. And on these formers, make sure to at least on one side, if not both, I'm going to do on one side, peel off the paper. And this one on the bottom needs to curve with this shape a bit, so I'm just going to curve it, actually curve it down a bit so that it can conform to the shape inside the nose. You don't need to be perfect, but it'll just help it actually reinforce the nose just a bit more. What you're going to want to do is, after you've cut up both slots, just take it, put some hot glue on it and glue it in. I'm going to do the other one and then do that. Now the top one's shorter so it doesn't interfere with the hatch, but the bottom one goes into the second skin section as well. So it's fine that it doesn't fit. So now that I got both my slots cut out, I'm going to take my glue gun and just apply a bit of glue on here. So we're going to double check this on here, which side is the top and bottom. It's recommended that you do this before gluing. So now, this is my top. This aligns to here and this aligns to here. And you can see how this side aligns better to here than this side. So now I know that this is the top. The more curved side can also be the top, but it's slightly harder to tell that apart. So now I'm going to actually test fit the bottom one and take something, a pencil, a pen. I'm using a marker because the foam is soft, and mark on here where it goes to. So right here. And just apply glue up to that mark, leaving a bit of space to allow the glue to spread. And you just press it in. And now your fuselage is quite a bit stronger. What you also can do is take some popsicle sticks and stick them on these. I will not be doing that. I don't find it necessary, but it is an option. So now that we have that, we are going to let it sit and dry for a bit. And then test fit our skin segment 2. So we're just going to test fit it on here. Make sure that this bottom piece, it should go right up against the wing section. If it doesn't go right up against it, we can trim it off, but that's where it's intended to go. And then these little triangles up here, they are a bit tricky to deal with, but they just form in like any other side. So I'm actually going to do one side and then the other because I need to hold it in a bit more. But here, if you have some masking tape, I'm using some thin glue on. This will be your best friend. Just like the Master Series build, this masking tape will help you hold what you can't hold by hand. Don't forget to put glue on the bottom of this section here. The bottom fuse reinforcer. So now, instead of holding this by hand here, I'm going to take a piece of masking tape and just tape it on there. And I can just let the glue dry on that one, and the masking tape will hold it in. Make sure for this that after you've built it, your former 2 is here, as said before. It doesn't need to perfectly reach all the way to the bottom, but you might need to trim a bit of this off. Here. And then for this, that your former 3 is on the outside like this. It just allows for a bigger surface area for the motor to push on, and so stronger for a pusher prop like this. Depending on how long your motor wires are, so if I put this on here, then my motor wires are long enough, rather on my ESC, that this can just pass in here. So I'll cut a thin slot on this. This may be on the plans by the time that you're building this. It is not on these plans that I'm using here. But if your motor wires aren't that long, but your ESC wires, for example, these battery leads and the servo plug is long enough, you could also just cut a small slot and then glue the ESC to the former. That is another option. It's probably a relatively stronger option, but I just built it like this and I have not found issues with it. So now we're going to test fit this. And then you can see that it fits relatively nicely on there. I'm looking at this side. If you look at it again, you can see it fits nicely. So we're going to just glue it on there. Same thing with the masking tape, just to make our lives easier. I'm actually going to prepare a bit of masking tape ahead of time this time. Put it on here. So, this is our almost finished fuselage. And there's one thing left that we have to do, and that is the hatch. So now this is our hatch. We are going to go through the same process with it as we did before, but this one's slightly different, as it has to take the shape of multiple formers. Instead of just curling up, it has to curl up into a shape that matches that of the fuselage. So we squish everything down. All of this actually does not need to come together this end, it just needs to be squished down. So you're going to need a bevel right here and here a bit, as well as on one of these. You can also bevel a bit more steeply on one of these, but these are so tiny that it's hard to get in there for a steep bevel, so I just do a shallow bevel on both. Don't forget to change your knife blade when it goes dull. That's what I need to do here. These are tiny pieces, so you want to be careful when working on them. If it falls off the paper, just like mine did here, it's not a problem. Just tack it down with a piece of glue, making sure not to glue it to any other of the pieces. And then you can do a relatively steep bevel on this back piece right here, or actually rather front piece. And then do not forget to peel off the paper on this. Weight matters, and the paper will help us with that. So now we should be able to carefully push this together, and these in the front will meet. Here is actually a previous prototype hatch to show what a finished hatch should look like. So you want to make sure that these fit together, these front pieces right here, but these back pieces do not. These might need to fit together depending on how you built your aircraft, your fuselage. But the most important part is that these fit together. So I am actually going to go over them an extra time with the thicker end of the bamboo skewer, just to give it like a bevel sort of. But everything else seems to be fine. And now you're actually going to want to bevel this either on here, this edge, or this edge and this edge. It doesn't matter as they meet up together. I'm going to bevel the outer ones so that they can meet up together nicely. And now you can see that the front of the hatch meets together with a bit of friction. It's a bit hard to get in there, but it still meets together nicely. I have to hold it with my fingers to get it to work. So what you're going to do is, by now your fuselage should have dried. So you can just carefully peel off all the masking tape. Okay, so now that we have our fuselage, we can tuck the ESC wire in here. Now you can see where the hatch goes. The only open cutout other than the wing cutout goes on here. So now we have to have it form here, and these two need to go in here in conjunction with this piece right here. You'll see that there's the triangular pieces have a sort of shape where you can go. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to apply glue into all these holes. You also, mine has a slightly tight fit over here, so you might need to squish down a bit of it or bevel it or widen it a bit because inaccuracies happen when you're cutting. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to do one side first. We're going to hold it up to here. We're going to put glue in there, hold it up to here after you tested it and glue that in. And then we're going to do the other side, and it'll all fit nicely. And that should be your hatch done. So let's carefully apply a bit of glue. You don't want too much, as always. I'm going to hold this for a bit, let it dry. Here's what it looked like to me building it. Just from here, I'm just holding it so that it aligns. Now it should be good. You can see it's keeping its shape somewhat. And now we can apply glue to the rest of it. And so now, if you take a look at my hatch, I'm just going to hold it with my hands until it fully dries. And it aligns quite nicely. So now the one thing I haven't done is apply glue in here. You could have done that there, but it's just easier to press it together and hold it outside of the hatch, so outside of the fuselage, so I just did that right now. You could actually put masking tape on that to let the masking tape put the pressure on it till it dries. Now we can set all this to the side. So now for the hatch attachment mechanisms, there isn't one specific one designed into the design, since a lot of people do prefer different hatch mounting mechanisms. So personally, what I have used before are magnets. I've just put a slight tab out with a piece of foam out of here and then a magnet in here. It's worked decently well. I also just sometimes put tape hatches and just have it tilt up like this and put a piece of tape here, and then you can put a magnet down here. The main issue I found is if you attach it on the sides, you have to be really careful, as the wind does like to pick up this hatch and throw it away like that. So whatever you choose, you either want a hinge in the back or in the front. The issue is if you have it in the back, it's hard. If you have it in the front, it's hard to open it. So I recommend in the back, but you want a relatively strong attachment mechanism in the front. And then you can just open it like this. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to put a piece of tape on there. And then I'm going to revisit the hatch attachment mechanism, the magnets that I'm going to put in the front, or another method, when I get to the electronics part. This can be any tape. The stickier the better. I'm just using regular packing tape that I cut a tiny slit off of. I'm just going to put that on there and squish it down on there. And now you can see that it can open up and close down. Okay, this is dried enough, we can take the masking tape off there. And this is a really nice looking finished fuselage. So now we're going to set this to the side and work on our wing. So for our wing, you will of course need the main wing piece. You will need your 2 spars and 2 of your servos. So what you're going to start off doing is you're going to take a ruler, and you see this green line, you're going to just gently right over it with a knife. You don't need to score it all the way. It's just enough to peel the paper off. So you can then get under it and peel the paper off between this green line and this red line over here. You're going to do the same thing over here and over here on all 3 of these sections. This green line is there to just provide a bit of rigidity to the control surfaces in the back of the wing, as that seems to be a big improvement to the aircraft. Now, if your paper doesn't peel off perfectly, that's fine. A bit of segments here and there won't significantly hurt anything. And also do not forget to peel off the paper on this edge too. You're going to want to do that before we glue our spars in, as soon as you glue them in, it gets really hard to peel the paper off. Should have mentioned this earlier, but the black holes that were somewhere here and here in the wing are DLG pegs. So you can discus launch aircraft. So DLGs are special gliders that you launch with holding them by the wing and launching them, and they fly up really high. This is mostly just so your hands are out of the way of the pusher propeller, so you can grab it by the peg with a bamboo skewer and just power up the plane and just throw it gently. The next step here will be beveling, double beveling this, and double beveling this, as well as single beveling the ailerons. You're going to want to leave the paper on the ailerons, just to give them a bit more rigidity. It's easier to bevel if you align it to an edge, and also you can bevel with a ruler, as I showed before, like this. It makes beveling easier if you haven't done it too much before. Now that that's done, if you have properly double beveled everything, you're ready to move on. What you're going to do is you're going to just gently tweak this and curve this a bit into the shape of an airfoil, so curving a bit more towards the front. You can also do this against the table. I hate the sound of the foam against the table, and it's also in an uncomfortable spot. So we're going to do this for all of us, so that when you put it on here, it looks like an airfoil shape. Now you can see if you press it on there, here, it looks like an airfoil. So now you're going to try to just match it nicely with the other. This is just a bit of pre-bending, just to help the wing hold its shape, make it easier. You should also be able to see that it fits in there. And now this one fits too. So, Now what you're going to do is you're going to line up your spar to the holes. So you have one like this. So this is just test fitting, no glue. And then we're going to do the exact same thing for the other one. And yes, you are going to have to bend the spar a bit and let it smoothly take the shape however it wants to. Okay, so what you're going to want to do now is take your spars out. I'm going to start with the back one first. And just put some glue in the slots. You should have the paper left on the back of the slot. So it allows you to put some glue in there. And then just put some glue along here, but be careful not to put too much along where the spar should run. On these edges, just trim the excess spar off. It is a completely fine occurrence. And I'm just going to reinforce it with a bit of glue in the corner, as you can see me doing, and just let it sit and dry. It should also bring the wings up a bit, so I'm going to prop them up a bit. At least this spar is supposed to have some polyhedral built into it, so you're going to let that happen when it dries. These spars are relatively thin, so they kind of want to conform more than forcing their polyhedral on the plane. So you're going to want to be careful and allow that polyhedral to happen. I'm going to do the same thing for the other spar. I'm also going to squeeze some glue into this part right here to help it hold the polyhedral that it needs to. And don't forget to reinforce on the back with some glue. And just wipe off the extra. So now we're just going to want to wait for this to dry. Now that it's somewhat dried, we can start folding over with the first section. So I'm actually going to bring this, I'm going to leave the support for the polyhedral on there. I'm actually going to bring this closer to the edge. I'm going to just apply some glue into this slot right here. Some glue on the top of the spars. And some glue in the back here. And just hold it until it dries. Once the glue on your first section has dried, what you're going to want to do is repeat the same thing for your outer sections. So now the polyhedral should hold by itself. Should have been enough time for it to dry. And don't forget to add a bit of glue on this edge right here. It should meet up nicely with the other edge. And you're also going to want to take some tape and tape this shut. The most important thing is that the tape goes on the top, which is where its strength is needed to keep that polyhedral in place. So now you should have a wing section like this, and we're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing for the other side. And so now should have a wing with relatively identical polyhedral on it. So, our next step will be these wonderful things. These are our booms and our elevator. So, let's start off with our elevator. This is relatively simple. We're just going to take our knife and bevel it. So, we're actually going to bevel the actual elevator, not the control surface, because the control surface is really thin, and we want to save that space for our control form. And our bevel is done, and our control surface can move up. You really don't need this much throw, but it's good to have it, the extra space with the bevel. We're also going to reinforce it, as we normally do. So I'm going to take some hot glue, take a scrap piece of foam, and take out as much of that hot glue as we can. Otherwise, you're going to glue your joint shut. So you can actually go through multiple times, squeeze out as much as you can, and just set it off to the side to dry like this. Now we're going to move on to our booms. So these two have an identical way of being put together. They are identical. So what you're going to do is slide your bamboo skewer in here. You're going to want one, but one doesn't go all the way. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to first glue in one, and then we're going to leave the pointy part on so that we can take a second one that has the pointy part on it and actually interface the pointy parts with each other like that. So that the pointy parts overlap and we have a good joint between the two pops of the two skewers, giving us strength. So what you're going to do is you're going to put some glue in the slot from the back to the front and then glue the skewer in there. In here, and I'm going to put a bit of glue on top of the skewer as it's hard to fill up the slot otherwise. Don't put too much, and you can wipe off all the stuff that isn't needed there. But overall, yeah, this is how you should do it. And make sure to hold it flat while you do so it doesn't dry in a curled up sheet. So now we're going to take this pointy one. It's going to interface with the other pointy side to overlap them. And then mark with a marker. If you have long bamboo skewers, maybe you could fit the entire thing with one bamboo skewer. But that is hard to do as this is taking 1.5 of mine or so. So now, what I'm going to do is apply some glue in there and do the same process over again. And your tips of the pointy tips of the things should overlap just like that, one on top of another. Good. So now you have one boom done. It should be much stronger with these skewers in here. Strong enough that you don't need any reinforcement or anything for your elevator in the back. For it to hold everything like the elevator in the back. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing with the second boom. Good. So these are my two finished booms. I can set them to the side and check in on my elevator. So the hinge seems pretty dried now. It's still a bit sticky, but it's enough. Fine. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one boom. It doesn't matter which side's inside or outside you pick. And you're going to make sure that the slot for the elevator lines up and the elevator isn't really rubbing. So mine is rubbing, so I'm going to actually just, as a precautionary measure, take both sides and just cut a bit off. Just a tiny sliver, as you do for most of your hinges anyways, or your control surfaces rather. And just cut a tiny bit off, just to give it some space to move. And then once I cut that off, I can take this, add some glue, make sure to put some glue on the tab that will fit in the slot. And fit it in the slot. Now, try to make sure that your elevator is level. How I do that is, you don't actually see the boom right now, but I try to make sure I put the elevator on my table, and then take this top edge of the boom, and make sure that it aligns with the edge of the table. It will be slightly lower, but this just makes sure that the elevator is perpendicular to the actual axis of flight, allowing us to have a nice and level flight. And now the second one, it should just align itself. So now I don't want this just falling over, so I'm gonna put it like this, and as long as both of my booms are level, I know that the elevator is perpendicular, and it's where I want it to be. I know it doesn't look perfectly perpendicular in the camera, but that's just field of view, I think, because from my point of view, they're perfectly perpendicular. And now we're going to revisit the wing, of course. The wing is going to nicely slot into here. Again, you might have to trim it a bit here and there. This top part on here, on the boom, being so thin, it actually kind of molds to it. So we're going to insert both. They should insert on the edges of the polyhedral, or on the inside or outside edges of it, but around there. That should be where it goes. So you can see that mine fits nicely. Right about there. Right there. I just didn't realize the camera was that low. Yep. So on here, we're just going to take it on the bottom. Make sure to push it in all the way as well. That's something I forgot to mention. And just hold it down and just add some glue on it to the edge. And make sure to take any scrap piece of foam and just take that glue off of there. You know the drill, extra weight means it flies worse, and you don't want that. And just try to make sure that your elevator during this process is perfectly level with your wing. Try to get it as level as you can with the wing, just so your plane flies nice and straight. Mine is nice and level. A good way to figure out if your parts are perpendicular, don't go off of this top line, because this one's actually diagonal. So you're going to want to go off the bottom crease. You can actually see the crease here. So just go off the bottom crease, and if it fits right parallel to the crease, you know that your booms are perpendicular. They don't have to fit right on the crease, but parallel to it. And also make sure that your vertical stabilizers, or the booms rather, are perpendicular to your wing and your horizontal stabilizer, just to make sure that your plane tracks straight and doesn't roll weirdly or anything like that. So this is our main assembly. And now all that's left from the plane assembly is to glue the fuselage on. So now, what we're actually going to do is install our servos. So for our servos, we are going to take two and install them in these slots in the wings. And we're going to take one and install it right here in our boom. It can go in a couple of different places, but just generally in our boom right here. So I'm going to take mine and just glue it in. So what I will do here now is, so I would like to route my wires for the ailerons to below the wing, just to make it easier to troubleshoot. You could also try to like cut a slot in here and run it through the wing and everything. It's up to you. It is just a matter of personal preference, as it will look nicer if you do that. But I personally don't care that much about looks, as you will not see it in the air. And we can just pass this wire through here. And I'm actually going to tack it down over here on the side of the boom, just because you really don't need this much length. This is going to go straight into the fuselage, and the receiver is going to be right there. So you should have a push rod, right? So very important thing It's used to control the surface, the control surface. So we're gonna put it in here and just have it ride right along the surface edge, and we're gonna use that as a mark for where to put our elevator control horn. And here it is. This is just a 3D printed version of one of those mini control horns. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut a slot in this control surface on the bottom, widen it a bit with the X-Acto, and then I'm gonna just double check that this mini control horn fits in here. So it doesn't particularly, so I'm going to take the X-Acto and just widen it a tiny bit more, give it the space that it needs, and wonderful, it fits right in. So now we're going to take a marker, and we are of course going to mark where we need our Z-bend. You align it in your Z-bend pliers, and you make a Z-bend on that mark. So now it actually aligns really nicely with what I need it to. Cut off the excess, as you really don't need that much excess on a Z-bend. So now we didn't glue our control horn in yet, because otherwise we would not be able to put in the wire into it. So we take it now, and we glue it in level. So I found also that my control surface, or rather my control rod, will bend back and forth. So it's something that you should take a servo tester and test, because if it significantly bends back and forth, you can just take a zip tie and reinforce it. So what I will do is, if this happens to you, I'm going to take a piece of foam, put it on here, and pass the zip tie through the boom. And then again, press the push rod to the foam so that it kind of acts as a guide for it. So now with this contraption on here, the push rod no longer bends. So now that that's done, we can move on to the ailerons. So if you have not beveled your ailerons yet, as I have not, you are going to want to do that now. There we go, so this aileron is beveled. So after you've beveled it, you're again going to put some glue in there and reinforce it, and then take a scrap piece and squeeze as much glue as possible out of that aileron. And then you're going to repeat the same exact thing for the other side. Don't forget that you're actually beveling the aileron and you're not beveling the wing on here, unlike the elevator. And we can let this sit for a bit. While we let that sit, what you can do here is, first of all, take your receiver. There are two good places to put your receiver. One is you could put it back here into the fuselage, over to the side there, but it's going to be pretty hard to access even if you reverse it for any sort of modification. If you're using a smaller receiver, it might be slightly easier, but it's still going to be hard. So what I found is I actually put my receiver in my hatch. That gives me plenty of access to it, and when it closes up, it's hidden away, and you actually have a way to stick your antenna out too if you want to. So it'll close up like this, and I leave my antenna sticking out, and your receiver's in your hatch. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put a bit of glue on my receiver and stick it in the hatch. You can have your servo wires facing any direction. I choose to have them facing back. And I'm going to go ahead and plug my throttle channel in. Now that you have your receiver in, that is done, and we can return to our ailerons. Now we have our ailerons on here. They're still somewhat sticky again, but they're mostly done. take some control horns, and I'm going to cut the slots for them. They're actually marked on here. Try to make sure that your control horn has the hole over the hinge. That'll just allow even rotation. And yes, there. So I'm going to put it in here and just leave it. It looks to fit nicely with the hole over the control surface on here, so I can leave it on there. Now our servos. So I can put it in here. So what you're going to do is you're literally just going to put a bit of glue on the spars there and on the outside. And you're going to just tack your servo down. If you were going to pass your wires through the middle of the wing, that would be the time to route your wires through before you glue it in and route them out here. But I'm using a Y lead and I am just going to route it on the outside. Again, because that makes my life easier. With if anything goes wrong with the servos, replacing them, or just general wiring. And I'm also going to take this Y lead and tack down the place where the Y lead attaches to the servo over here, so it doesn't just come unplugged. And also just give it a bit of tension so it holds itself. Here you have one done. Again, let's take a servo tester and just test it. I do have movement. Now what I would also like to do is, you might have to do this, you heard a bit of the rubbing sound, so I'm actually going to take my X-Acto knife, and as we did with the elevator, I'm going to cut a tiny sliver off here. You can actually see the light go through that sliver on there, so that it doesn't rub against anything. And we're going to repeat that process with the other one. So I actually took the servo out of another plane, so I'm going to have to peel off some of this extra foam. This won't affect aerodynamics nearly enough on this aircraft to make a difference if that's one of the reasons you're routing the wires on the inside instead of the outside, unless you plan on flying at like 100 miles an hour, which this plane really won't go. So now we have all our servo connections done. We have our main airframe. All we're missing is our fuselage mounted on top. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these wires, pass them through, and try to align this to the center. You can do this with a ruler or without. I am using this hole I cut as a reference because I know that that was in the center from where I cut it on the bottom. So you can just use that as reference, and then glue this on. Now keep in mind your bottom fuse reinforcer in here, that slot, might be a bit too long and you might have to cut it down depending on how you built your aircraft. The most important thing is that your motor be straight with everything else, because otherwise your plane will not fly straight. So try to go from the back while holding it to dry. Make sure your motor is level with everything. So now this is a very important joint and there isn't any tabs or anything, so you're just gonna want to reinforce it with more glue. Here, be generous with your glue. Rather have a bit more weight in this section than have your fuselage and all your receiver, battery, AC, and motor fall off everything else mid-flight. Now my nose is pretty straight, my motor is straight, my fuselage is on there. So, also as a side note, This aircraft is too small for landing gear, but it does like to land on its nose as its booms protrude out down here, and the nose is much higher than them, so it will tilt down on its nose. So that is why the nose reinforcers are there, just as an explanation. And now would be a good time also to plug in your ailerons and elevator. You can tuck the antenna in also, that's fine too. So this is what your practically finished aircraft looks like. Here, it looks like a beauty. Should look really nice. Be proud of your work. And there's one more thing left to do. Take a piece of Velcro. Doesn't need to be big. I'm using a small one here, but I found it to be enough. And you're going to either want to glue it to the side of your aircraft or to the bottom. So you can put it on the bottom fuse reinforcer, that's what I recommend, but you could also put it on the side inside here. That also works, but that means that side will get more damaged when you crash because all the weight of the battery is on it. And your battery, you're also going to want to make sure that it's fully up, that it's able to be fully up until former 1. That is what should balance the CG. The CG should be, if you go into the middle of these polyhedral wing, I go right here. This is where I balance it. It should be 25% of the wing chord. This is just going slightly into the polyhedral wing tip because of the swept wings. So you have to account for that. Now would also be a good time to go in there, and if you haven't done it yet, tack down your ESC. Just to not have it dangling all around. And for our hatch, I'm just going to grab some magnets. I'm using these 10mm neodymium ones right here. So I'm going to find a spot where the hatch lines up, and I'm actually going to take a spare piece of foam, use it as a tab, glue the magnet to one side of it. I will glue it onto this on the fuselage, just because I just realized if you glue it onto the nose, onto the hatch itself, it'll prevent the hatch from closing. So I'll glue it onto the fuselage, and then I'll make sure which side of the magnet is correct. Then take some glue, put it in the hatch, and then wait for that glue to dry and put some more in there, just so it doesn't fall off, because magnets are strong and you don't want your singular hatch attachment mechanism to just fall off. And then while that's drying, what we are going to do is take our transmitter. Let's power it on. Let's check out our dual rates and our expo. So 30% expo is a minimum. I'm actually going to turn mine up to 50 because this airplane is sensitive. And make sure your dual rates are set at 100, 80, and 60. That is what mine are, and 60 is a bit small, so when you get up high and you have some space to circle, you can use 60. 100 is a bit too much, so 80 is that good middle ground for flying. 60 is a bit little, but it's still usable, definitely, so if you have the space, use 60. It's just a bit more friendly. So if you only have 2 rate options, do 80 and 100. If you have 3, 60, 80, and 100 is a good call. And around 50% expo. I have found that 5-minute flight times, as our average with most planes, are good enough with this one. And it doesn't really need much trim, but that depends on the aircraft. Those are my transmitter settings. That's all I've been using for this plane. It's pretty simple to set up. So now what we should do is we'll plug in our battery. We'll actually put it in the nose. We'll plug it in, and we'll test. Don't forget to do a throttle calibration. All you have to do is, before you start, you want to uncut your throttle. You should have that set up if you don't. Put your throttle to full, make sure your propeller is off, and then put your throttle to 0, and your motor should be calibrated. So now you're going to check which direction it's spinning in. So mine's spinning in this direction. So this propeller that I have, this is a 3-blade 5035. but a 5030 on a higher kV motor like a 2280 two-blade will work just fine. So let's test that everything goes in the right direction. So my ailerons are moving in the right direction. My elevator is moving in the right direction. Make sure to set a fail-safe, just something, just in case your radio disconnects.
Middle rates, high rates.
This is what high rates looks like on here. This is plenty. You can actually turn it up to like 120% if your servos don't have enough throw. This is what my elevator throw looks like. Also plenty. Let's unplug it, since we're going to put our propeller on. Try to use a lock nut, one of these, if you can. It'll just hold it on better. One should have come with your motor. Just take some pliers, tighten it as far as it will go on there. Make sure your propeller, when you try to spin the motor, the propeller doesn't spin, it spins with the motor. Now, one more thing. We can actually take our battery, put it back in, and test our thrust. But you want to be very careful when doing this because it is a live propeller. You don't want it to cut anything. So I'm actually going to hold my plane up. And I can actually feel that even when I go below half throttle, the plane just wants to really push into my hand. That is a good sign. That means I will have plenty of thrust. I can unplug this, take my battery out, and congratulations on your finished J21. If you were thinking that I forgot the peg, you're right, I did. Take it and just measure out enough for your fingers to go like this. And just cut it off. Let's put it in and glue it in. So then all you're going to do to launch it is you're going to take it with your two fingers like this around the peg, and you're going to just lightly go around and throw it like that with a flick of your wrist while your throttle's powered on. It might carry it a bit to the side, so you'll have to compensate for it, but other than that, this is a nice spanking young aircraft with a unique launch mechanism. Should fit in your car, just carry it anywhere, fly it anywhere. It's a really nice plane. Now, congratulations on your finished airplane.
Low rates, middle rates.
Nice.
Okay.